Hi there, my name's Don and welcome to Project Urtle. Project Urtle is the story of building a camper van based on my Ford Ute here. It's a 2010 model, so not new, Ford 4x4 diesel single cab chassis Aussie Ute. And I'm going to convert that into a off-road camper which will contain a overhead queen-size double bed, a dinette, a small kitchen and a small shower ensuite. And if I've done all my calculations right, the whole weight of the camper van will fall inside of the standard gross vehicle mass, and it will be capable of doing some serious off-road travel. If it's not, I've really done something wrong, but we'll find out about that as we go along. First up, maybe I should fill in some background. Why is it called Project Urtle, you might say? Well, Urtle is a contraction of the word turtle, and turtles carry their home around on the back. And that's what this camper is going to do. It's going to carry our home around on its back. But Urtle has another potential meaning, and that is a contraction of the word hurtle. Hurtle meaning to rush about, to go quickly, maybe even recklessly. And well, maybe not quite so much on the reckless side of it, but that's the idea of motion is interesting to me. So, Project Urtle, the ute with a house on its back. It also happens to be the name of our very first Volkswagen camper van that we loved a great deal. And so I suppose it's really Urtle number 2. I'm retired, and to keep myself sane in retirement, I tend to build a lot of things. I've built all sorts of things, from strip built and stitch and glue kayaks to guitars and mandolins and ukuleles, in fact a whole stack of ukuleles. The first camper van that I built was on a Toyota Dyna truck, and that was when we lived in New Zealand many years ago, well before retirement. And I built that camper van, and it was finished about 2 weeks before we packed up and moved back to Australia, so I never really got to try it out. It went to a new owner, and I imagine that they had fun with it, but I never really got to try it. So many years passed since then. Sometime after that, my wife and I moved to the UK for work, and once there we bought ourselves a Volkswagen T4 camper van, and we toured all over Europe in that over a period of about 4 years. From the top of Norway to the south of Italy and everywhere in between, and we just loved that little machine. And it took us to places at a pace and at a cost that we could not have afforded otherwise. I've also done a lot of touring in other camper vans, hired camper vans, in the United States, again in Europe, around New Zealand, and each time I had really come to the conclusion that a camper van was the way to go for us, until I retired. Once I had retired, the plan was that we would spend time, a considerable amount of time, exploring our home country. Something we had neglected is the wrong word, but something we had decided we would leave until we retired, mostly because of cost. Overseas trips are expensive, and so the plan was to do those while I was still working and earning money, and do the less expensive touring around home while on a retirement budget. I was convinced that a camper van was the correct vehicle for us. We're touring type people rather than stay and camp type people. And so a vehicle that moves easily from one point to another, that can get into maybe places that a caravan, for instance, couldn't get into, really was what I had my heart set on. But reality sort of set in, and the length of time that it was going to take us to tour around Australia really said a caravan was probably a more practical proposition, even though the thought of towing around a big white moving roadblock didn't enthuse me at all. Of course, we could get to a place and unhitch the caravan and put it in storage if necessary. And we had the four-wheel drive that we were towing it with, that we could get off into the more inaccessible places. And we had a Toyota four-wheel drive for that. In between all of that touring and retiring, and the work that's involved in retiring doesn't just stop. I found time to build a teardrop caravan for my brother-in-law to tow behind his Can-Am Spider motorcycle. And that was an exercise in building something and keeping it light, very light. And we almost succeeded in that. It turned out a little bit too heavy and was eventually sold to be towed behind small sedans instead of a motorbike. After about now, almost 7-8 years of touring around Australia in our caravan, and we've loved every minute of it, I sat down the other night and looked at the map and drew out everywhere we had been on that map, looking for the places that we hadn't been yet. And in reality, we'd been pretty much everywhere that you can tow a caravan, and a few other places as well. But when I looked at it, there were some big chunks, some big lonely chunks in the middle of Australia where no caravan, of my style anyway, should be expected to go. Some fairly significant chunks of very remote desert. And the thought of having a camper van on a four-wheel drive that could achieve that really appealed. I should add that every night when we were stopped on the side of the road or in a caravan park or in a national park in the caravan, I spent most of the evening dreaming about building my perfect camper van. So Project Urtle has been a long time coming. It had its roots in New Zealand back in the 1980s. It got reinforced while living in Europe and while touring in the States, in Europe and New Zealand. A camper van has really been my first love. I was sitting down planning the next trip with the caravan when COVID-19 happened. And that put a full stop to our plans for the next trip. And I got to thinking about that, and although it was a big disappointment to be stuck at home, we were going to save a lot of money by not doing this next trip. Money that I'd already saved up. Well, maybe with the time I've got available at home and the money I'd already saved up for the trip, maybe I could build my camper van now and it would be almost free. Or at least that's what I told my wife. The old Toyota that we had was well past its use-by date. It was starting to cost a lot of money in maintenance and was starting to become a little bit unreliable. So it found a new home, and I came home with this second-hand Ford Ranger that you see behind me. It started out life as a service vehicle for Telstra, the major telco in Australia, and it had a huge white service body on the back to carry all the technicians' tools around. And when I first saw that, I looked at it and measured it and said, ooh, that's very close to being a camper van. Not quite what I had hoped, but fairly close. And in fact, I spent a little bit of time tinkering with it, adding a bed, adding a kitchen, changing this, changing that, and we did one short trip using it to tow the caravan, and then a off-road side trip in it. And it worked, but it was just a little too small. And so I decided that now COVID had hit, this was going to be the right time. Let's build this camper van. To be fair, there's a lot of camper vans on the market in Australia, from slide-on ones to built-on ones, and all of them fill a niche in the market. There's a lot of overlap in their design, and some of them have some unique features. But I couldn't afford any of them. It really wasn't an option on a retirement budget. So the very first thing that came at the top of the list in design criteria was, could I build it myself? And I was reasonably confident that I could. What I'm building is nothing new. It really builds on designs that are well tried and well represented around the market here in Australia. And really it was just going to be my take on it, my build in my budget. So the criteria had to be, first of all, I had to be able to afford it. Secondly, it had to fit on this Ford Ute and stay within the Ford's design parameters of axle loads and gross vehicle weight. And that means it has to stay inside of those weights when it's fully loaded, fully fueled, both of my wife and myself on board, all of our food, all of our clothing, all the equipment we need, recovery gear, you name it, that all has to go on board and fit it within the design capacity of the ute. I wasn't interested in the expense of going down the route of a gross vehicle mass or GVM upgrade. That was just beyond my means. So the basic parameters were set around weight, and that said, I had to find ways of building this that minimised weight accumulated during the build. So I started with a spreadsheet and listed everything that I was going to need and came up with an estimate of what the weight would be, and it fell just within the parameters I'd set. Like I said before, we wanted a double bed, we wanted a shower toilet, we wanted an indoor kitchen so that we could cook and stay away from the flies. We wanted a place where we could sit and eat, again away from the flies, but also out of the weather. Camping with a unit that I have to stand outside to cook, or put up a big awning or an annex or whatever, doesn't appeal to me. I want to be able to stop within a minute or two, step inside and do everything I need to do, and only go outside when I want to go outside, not because I have to be outside. So if this project sounds like something that might interest you, why don't you stick around? There will be more episodes, and I'll take you through how I built it. It'll be not a how to do it series. This will just show you some of the things that I built as we go along, and a quick overview of the kind of construction methods used, but certainly not a how to do it video. And I hope the reason for you watching this is to gain ideas of what you could possibly do yourself, because I think there's a great deal of joy in making things, and I think we all should be, wherever possible, become makers, because there really is a lot of satisfaction in that. So that's the story, that backstory. Next episode we'll delve into the design process. Thanks for watching. Bye.